It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday morning. I had woken up early, brewed a pot of coffee, and let Max, a golden retriever with a heart as big as his wagging tail, out into the backyard for his usual routine. Max wasn't just any dog. He was my service animal, trained to assist me with mobility issues stemming from a car accident years ago. He was also my constant companion, my confidant, and, in many ways, the reason I could navigate life with some semblance of normalcy despite the physical limitations imposed by my injuries. But nothing about that day would turn out to be normal. The first sign that something was wrong came when I heard a sharp crack echo through the neighborhood. At first, I thought it might have been fireworks or a car backfiring. Common enough sounds in our suburban community. But then Max yelped, a sound so piercing it sent chills down my spine. Rushing outside, I found him lying on the grass near the fence separating my property from the HOA president's yard. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the green blades crimson. Panic surged through me as I dropped to my knees beside him, cradling his head in my arms. "Max, stay with me, boy," I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. His breathing was shallow, his eyes wide with confusion and pain. Before I could process what had happened, a voice called out from beyond the fence. "Oh, thank God you're okay," said Mr. Harold Peterson, the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA's increasingly draconian rules. Clutching a rifle in one hand, he peered over the wooden slats, his expression shifting rapidly between relief and horror. "I didn't realize it was your dog," he stammered, lowering the weapon. "I thought it was, well, a coyote or something. They've been causing trouble around here lately." His words hung in the air like smoke after a firecracker, heavy and suffocating. "A coyote?" I repeated, incredulous. My voice trembled with rage and disbelief. "You shot my service dog, Harold. Do you even know what that means? This isn't some stray wandering onto your lawn. He's registered, certified, and essential to my daily functioning." By this point, neighbors had begun gathering at the edges of my property, drawn by the commotion. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, and a few downright judgmental. It was clear that word of the incident would spread quickly, but all I cared about in that moment was getting Max help. Grabbing my phone, I dialed 911, explaining the situation while trying to keep Max calm. The operator assured me that both animal control and paramedics were en route, though their arrival felt agonizingly slow. As I waited, Harold continued to justify himself, pacing nervously along his side of the fence. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I really am. But how was I supposed to know it was your dog? You should have kept him inside if you knew there were predators around." His tone shifted subtly, hinting at defensiveness. "Besides, everyone knows these dogs aren't cheap. Surely you could afford another one." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Another one? As if Max were replaceable, a mere accessory rather than a living, breathing creature who had devoted his entire existence to helping me. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I forced myself to stay focused on Max losing control. Wouldn't do either of us any good right now. When the authorities finally arrived, they took statements from both Harold and me, snapping photos of the scene and examining the bullet wound. Animal control carefully loaded Max onto a stretcher, promising to rush him to the nearest veterinary clinic capable of handling such severe trauma. Watching them drive away broke something inside me. For the first time since the accident that left me disabled, I felt truly alone. Without Max, I wasn't sure how I'd manage even the simplest tasks: opening doors, picking up dropped items, navigating crowded spaces without anxiety overwhelming me. He wasn't just a pet, he was my lifeline. But amidst the chaos, a thought began to form in the back of my mind, a realization that would soon reshape not only my relationship with Harold and the HOA, but also the entire trajectory of this story. While most people in the neighborhood knew me simply as Sarah Thompson, single mother, and occasional PDA volunteer, very few realized that I held another title: U.S. Congresswoman. Elected 2 years prior, I represented a district several counties away, choosing to live in this quiet suburb to maintain a semblance of privacy. Politics hadn't been part of my original plan. I entered public service almost accidentally, spurred by a desire to advocate for disability rights after my own struggles, but it had become a significant part of my identity. And yet, Here I was, reduced to pleading for justice for my dog, while someone like Harold dismissed my pain as inconsequential. That night, unable to sleep, I drafted a letter, not to Harold, nor to the HOA board, but to the local press. In it, I recounted the events of the day, emphasizing not just the personal toll of losing Max, but also the broader implications of gun violence, negligent behavior, and systemic disregard for individuals with disabilities. Before hitting send, I hesitated, weighing the potential consequences. Going public meant sacrificing the anonymity I'd worked so hard to preserve. It meant inviting scrutiny not only of Harold's actions, but of mine as well. Yet, deep down, I knew it was the right thing to do. If sharing my story could prevent another person or another dog from suffering the same fate, then exposing the truth was worth whatever backlash might follow. By sunrise, the article had gone viral. Headlines blared across national news outlets. HOA president shoots disabled woman's service dog in tragic misunderstanding, and Congresswoman speaks out after personal tragedy. Social media exploded with outrage. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Max trending within hours. Reporters camped outside my house, eager for interviews, while angry constituents flooded Harold's voicemail, demanding accountability. Even members of Congress reached out, offering condolences and support. For better or worse, my quiet suburban existence had been thrust into the spotlight. Harold, predictably, tried to defend himself, issuing a statement claiming he acted in self-defense and accusing me of exploiting the situation for political gain. His attempt to shift blame only fueled the firestorm, drawing further criticism from advocates for both animal rights and disability rights. Meanwhile, updates on Max's condition trickled in slowly. The vet team worked tirelessly to save him, performing multiple surgeries to repair internal damage caused by the bullet. Each report brought mixed emotions: relief that he was still alive, fear that he might never fully recover, guilt over the role I'd played in making his plight public. As days turned into weeks, the fallout from the shooting rippled outward, affecting not just Harold and me, but the entire neighborhood. Tensions ran high, dividing residents into factions. Those who supported stricter gun control measures and harsher penalties for negligence, and those who sided with Harold, arguing that property owners had a right to protect themselves from perceived threats. Amidst the turmoil, I struggled to balance my roles as a grieving pet owner, a politician under intense scrutiny, and a neighbor caught in the crossfire of a deeply polarized debate. Little did I know, however, that the real battle was only beginning, and that its outcome would hinge not on anger or vengeance, but on forgiveness and understanding. The media frenzy surrounding Max's shooting intensified with each passing day, turning what began as a personal tragedy into a national debate about gun laws, disability rights, and community accountability. My inbox overflowed with messages, some supportive, others accusatory, all demanding answers or action. Strangers sent heartfelt letters expressing solidarity, sharing stories of their own service animals or experiences with negligent neighbors. Others criticized me for politicizing the incident, accusing me of using Max's suffering to advance my career. Meanwhile, local news outlets camped outside Harold's house, hounding him for comments while his family cowered behind closed blinds. The once idyllic neighborhood now felt like a war zone, its streets lined with satellite trucks and protesters holding signs that read "Justice for Max" or "Protect Our Rights." Despite the chaos, I tried to focus on what mattered most: Max's recovery. Every morning, I drove to the veterinary clinic where he was being treated, sitting by his side as he fought to regain strength. The bullet had missed vital organs, but caused significant internal damage, requiring multiple surgeries and weeks of intensive care. His golden coat was matted from bandages, and his usually bright eyes dulled with exhaustion. Yet, even in his weakened state, Max recognized me, thumping his tail weakly whenever I entered the room. Those moments kept me grounded, reminding me why I'd chosen to speak out despite the risks. But outside the hospital walls, the battle raged on. Harold's initial attempts to downplay the incident backfired spectacularly. In an ill-advised interview with a local reporter, he doubled down on his claim that he mistook Max for a coyote, insisting that suburban homeowners had every right to defend themselves against wildlife threats. If people would just keep their pets indoors, he argued, none of this would have happened. His words sparked outrage, particularly among disability advocates who pointed out the absurdity of expecting service animals to remain confined when their very purpose was to assist their handlers in public spaces. Critics lambasted Harold not only for his negligence, but also for his apparent ignorance of the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, which explicitly protects the rights of individuals with service animals. As the controversy grew, so did calls for legal action. Animal welfare organizations joined forces with disability rights groups to file a lawsuit against Harold, alleging reckless endangerment, animal cruelty, and violation of federal law. Local authorities launched an investigation into whether Harold's possession and use of a firearm violated any statutes, including those related to hunting regulations and discharge within city limits. Meanwhile, petitions circulated online urging the HOA board to remove Harold from his position as president, citing his inability to represent the interests of all residents fairly. Within days, thousands of signatures piled up, putting immense pressure on the board to act. Caught in the crossfire, I found myself torn between two conflicting impulses: the desire for justice and the need for peace. On one hand, I wanted Harold held accountable, not just for harming Max, but for perpetuating attitudes that marginalize people with disabilities. His dismissive remarks about replacing Max reflected a broader societal tendency to undervalue the contributions of service animals and the individuals who rely on them. On the other hand, I worried that escalating the conflict might further divide the community, alienating neighbors who already viewed me as an outsider due to my political status. Balancing these concerns proved challenging, especially as the spotlight intensified. One evening, after another long day at the clinic, I returned home to find a package waiting on my doorstep. Inside was a handwritten note from Harold's wife, Margaret, accompanied by a bouquet of wilting daisies. Her message was brief but poignant. I'm sorry for everything. Please know that not everyone in this family agrees with Harold's actions. We hope Max gets better soon. Reading her words, I felt a pang of sympathy. Like me, Margaret was caught in a situation beyond her control, forced to bear the consequences of someone else's choices. Unlike Harold, however, she seemed genuinely remorseful, acknowledging the harm done without resorting to excuses or blame shifting. Margaret's gesture gave me pause, prompting me to reconsider how I approached the situation. While accountability remained crucial, perhaps there was room for dialogue alongside demand for justice. With that thought in mind, I reached out to the HOA board, proposing a town hall meeting to address the issues raised by the incident. My goal wasn't to vilify Harold or rally support for punitive measures, but rather to foster understanding and promote meaningful change. To my surprise, the board agreed, scheduling the event for the following weekend. The night of the town hall, the community center buzzed with anticipation. Residents packed the room, spilling into overflow seating areas as cameras rolled and microphones crackled. Emotions ran high, with some attendees shouting accusations, while others pleaded for calm. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped onto the stage, gripping the podium tightly to steady my nerves. Behind me, a slideshow displayed images of Max before the shooting, playing fetch in the park, assisting me at the grocery store, lounging contentedly on the couch. As the photos flashed across the screen, murmurs rippled through the crowd, softening the tension ever so slightly. I stand here today not as a congresswoman, I began, but as a neighbor, a mother, and someone whose life has been forever changed by the events of recent weeks. What happened to Max wasn't just an accident. It was a symptom of deeper problems plaguing our society: fear of the unknown, lack of education about disability rights, and a culture that prioritizes property over people. But tonight, we have an opportunity to confront those challenges head-on and work toward solutions that benefit everyone. For the next hour, I outlined proposals aimed at preventing similar incidents in the future. These included mandatory training sessions for HOA members on ADA compliance, stricter enforcement of local gun ordinances, and the establishment of a neighborhood task force dedicated to fostering inclusivity and mutual respect. I emphasized that these measures weren't about punishing Harold or anyone else, but about creating a safer, more compassionate community for all residents. By the time I finished speaking, the room had fallen silent, the hostility replaced by thoughtful reflection. Harold, Seated near the back of the auditorium, rose hesitantly to respond. For the first time since the shooting, he appeared genuinely contrite, his usual bravado replaced by humility. "I never intended to hurt anyone," he admitted, his voice cracking with emotion. "And I certainly didn't mean to cause so much pain, not just to Sarah and Max, but to everyone affected by this mess. If I could take it all back, I would in a heartbeat." He went on to pledge his cooperation with any reforms proposed by the task force, vowing to educate himself and others about disability rights. Though his apology couldn't undo the damage, it marked a critical step toward reconciliation. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to heal. The HOA implemented many of the changes I'd suggested, hosting workshops and distributing information materials to raise awareness about service animals and disability accommodations. Neighbors who had previously avoided me started reaching out, offering condolences and volunteering to help during Max's recovery. Even Harold made amends, visiting the clinic one afternoon to personally apologize to Max, bringing along a basket of treats and toys. Though Max greeted him cautiously, his tail wagged tentatively, signaling a willingness to forgive. Still, the road ahead remained uncertain. Max's progress was slow, requiring months of physical therapy to regain full mobility. Doctors warned that he might never return to his former level of activity, leaving me anxious about how we'd adapt to his limitations. At the same time, the attention surrounding the case continued to weigh heavily on me, forcing me to navigate complex ethical dilemmas as both a private citizen and a public figure. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, one truth became clear. Healing required more than justice. It demanded empathy, patience, and a commitment to rebuilding trust. Little did I know, however, that the final chapter of the story would bring yet another twist. One that tested not only my resilience, but also my capacity for forgiveness. Months passed, and Max's recovery progressed steadily, though not without setbacks. Physical therapy sessions became a daily ritual, with specialists guiding him through exercises designed to rebuild strength and coordination. At first, he struggled even to stand without assistance, his legs trembling beneath him as if made of jelly. But slowly, incrementally, he improved. By winter, he was able to walk short distances unaided, his tail wagging with renewed vigor whenever I called his name. Watching him regain independence filled me with gratitude, yet also underscored the fragility of life and how quickly everything could change in an instant. While Max's physical healing dominated much of my attention, the emotional scars left by the shooting lingered longer. Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair, especially when betrayal comes from within your own community. Though many neighbors had extended olive branches, their gestures often felt tinged with guilt or obligation rather than genuine remorse. Harold, too, remained a complicated figure in my life. While his public apology and subsequent efforts to educate himself about disability rights were commendable, I couldn't shake the memory of his initial dismissiveness, the way he'd reduced Max to a replaceable commodity. It wasn't hatred that consumed me, but disappointment, a quiet ache born of shattered expectations. Then came the letter that changed everything. One chilly February morning, as frost clung stubbornly to the grass outside, I opened my mailbox to find an envelope addressed in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a note from Jake Peterson, Harold's teenage son. Unlike his father, Jake had always kept a low profile, rarely participating in neighborhood events or engaging in HOA politics. His presence in our lives had been so minimal that I barely recognized him beyond passing glimpses at school functions or grocery store aisles. Yet here he was, reaching out in a moment when I least expected it. The letter was brief but heartfelt. "Dear Miss Thompson, I know words can't fix what happened, but I wanted to say how sorry I am about Max. My dad, he doesn't always think before he acts, and sometimes he says things he doesn't mean. But none of this is your fault, and neither is it Max's. Please don't let one bad decision define us, or you." Enclosed with the note was a sketch of Max lying peacefully under a tree, sunlight streaming to the leaves above him. The drawing was simple yet striking, capturing Max's gentle spirit in a way that brought tears to my eyes. For the first time since the shooting, I felt something other than anger or sadness. Hope. Curious about the boy behind the gesture, I invited Jake to visit. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon, clutching a sketch pad nervously against his chest. Tall and lanky, with dark hair falling into his eyes. He looked every bit the awkward teenager navigating the treacherous waters of adolescence. Over hot chocolate, we talked, not just about Max, but about art, school, and the pressures of growing up in a household where perfectionism reigned supreme. Jake confessed that watching his father spiral into controversy had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege, responsibility, and the consequences of unchecked power. Sometimes, he admitted, I feel like I'm living in someone else's shadow. Like no matter what I do, people will always see me as Harold's kid. His vulnerability resonated deeply with me. As a politician, I understood all too well the weight of association, the assumptions people make based on family ties or shared affiliations. But unlike Jake, I'd chosen my path. Harold's choices weren't mine to bear. Still, hearing him articulate his struggles reminded me of the importance of separating individuals from their circumstances. Just as I didn't want to be judged solely by my title as a congresswoman, Jake deserved the chance to define himself apart from his father's mistakes. Inspired by our conversation, I decided to take a bold step toward reconciliation. With Max by my side, now strong for short outings, I paid Harold a visit. When he answered the door, his expression shifted from surprise to apprehension, clearly expecting another confrontation. Instead, I extended an invitation to join me in co-sponsoring a community initiative aimed at fostering inclusivity and education around disability rights. This isn't about erasing the past, I explained, but about creating a future where incidents like this don't happen again. And who better to lead the charge than someone with first-hand experience of the fallout? Harold hesitated, visibly conflicted, pride warred with humility, ego with accountability. Finally, after a long pause, he nodded. If you're willing to give me a second chance, he said quietly, then I owe it to everyone, not just you and Max, but the entire neighborhood, to do better. His words carried a sincerity I hadn't heard before, signaling a willingness to grow rather than dig in his heels. Over the next several months, Harold threw himself into the project with unexpected enthusiasm. Together, we organized workshops, panel discussions, and outreach programs designed to raise awareness about service animals, accessibility, and the broader needs of disabled individuals. Neighbors who had previously dismissed such issues as irrelevant began attending events, asking questions, and volunteering their time. Even skeptics softened, recognizing the value of inclusion not as a burden, but as an opportunity to strengthen the fabric of our community. Max played a central role in these efforts, becoming something of a local celebrity. Children flocked to him at events, eager to learn about his training and responsibilities. Adults marveled at his resilience,